What is up, everybody? This is Dr. Andrew Kim. I am your host of another episode of the live stream of the Insomniacs. So, welcome everybody who is joining late night with me tonight. Again, Dr. Andrew Kim. I'm a board certified psychiatrist. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for those who continue to subscribe to my YouTube channel, watching my videos, commenting, engaging. I really do appreciate you. So, welcome to another episode. And today's topic is for you parents out there, especially, and for even for those of you who are not parents. This is the question I have to reflect on your own experiences, whether it's you growing up as a kid or you as a parent right now. Parents, do you let your kids play outside? Yes or no? And if you are reluctant to, if you are scared to, if you feel like as you reflect, maybe you're not letting your kids play outside as much as you feel like you should, how come? I am curious. So, look, every day we are bombarded as a society here in America with tons of negativity, right? We watch the news, and you understand, right? The news, this is all about shock value, right? Sadly, news cycles do not thrive on positivity, right? News cycles feed off of negativity, fear, fear mongering, and all we hear about, right? Kidnappings, murders, crime, homicides, car accidents, tragedies, natural disasters. So it's no surprise that when this is what gets the ratings, this is what sells, I guess at this point, not anymore, papers aren't relevant anymore, but this is what sells advertising on social media, on websites, on TV. It's hard. I think it's hard for us to kind of decouple what's actually happening in our neighborhoods and what the media is telling us is happening, right? So I want us to keep that concept in mind. So again, I see several people, there's 6, 7, 8 of you now joining here. Again, the question for tonight's episode is, if you are a parent, do you let your kids play outside? Yes or no? And do you do that with anxiety, with trepidation, with fear, or do you have a parenting style where you're like, roam free, go do what you want, come back before it's dark? And we're going to reflect on our own childhood. So I'll talk about my experiences. For those of you who are not parents, I just want you to join in and just chime in. Like, what were your experiences as kids growing up? So, all right, so let's talk about this. Is there even a reason that we're talking about this? Well, yes. For those of us who are parents, how we raise our family unit, how we go about doing it, the anxieties and fears that come along with it adds to stress, and stress is a part of life, right? And there's more and more literature coming out, which we'll review a little bit of today. We're not going to go in depth. We can do an episode later if you want, just about how there does seem to at least be a trend. I'm going to use that word loosely. It's hard to study this kind of stuff. I mean, mostly it's going to be surveys, and you know how surveys are. Surveys are imperfect, sample sizes are imperfect, but there are some surveys that are indicating actual rates of lower outside play by children and increasing concerns from parents themselves about allowing kids to go play outside. So let's go through a couple things. And again, these are very loose studies. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on here. Why don't we look at one of these studies from the UK? So I know it's not exactly the same as the US. It's hard to find this kind of literature because I don't think there's very well done studies on a lot of these things. So let's take a look here at a British study. I'm going to pull this up. You can see the summary here. This is from an organization called Save the Children. I'm not even very familiar with them, so I'm not saying I know what their deal is, but it's one of the few studies I could find that looked at actual raw rates. It looks like they surveyed 3,000 adults and children in the UK, and they said based off their survey in 2022, it said fewer children are playing outside more than ever in the UK. They're saying that only 1 in 4 kids play outside regularly on their streets compared to kind of the baby boomer generation, saying that those who are aged between 55 and 64, that their rates of playing outside were about 80%. And this has steadily declined over just a few generations, where now it's only about 27% of children who are regularly playing outside their homes. Okay. And they do go into a few things, citing, fears of irritating neighbors, making noise outside, being told by others you're making too much noise, worrying about car accidents, things of that nature. Okay. So that's at least one thing to cite, saying, and there are a few other ones in the US, seems like smaller in nature, that talk about kind of this trend, noticing when they're surveying parents, there's a lower rate of kids playing outside, presumably. It's not like, I don't think they have a great comparator point like surveying people back in the day, but that's what we're kind of seeing. Now, when I did a PubMed search and I'm looking in some of the medical journal archives, here's something I found from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Okay. So, looking at kind of the mindset of parents themselves, like what are the concerns? And I want you, if you are parents out there, to see, do any of these things resonate with you? And how did this maybe differ than how you were raised when you were growing up? Were you in a similar boat where there were these fears about playing outside? Okay, so let's take a look at what the American Academy of Pediatrics cited as some of the reasons that were cited in numerous studies and meta-analyses done around this topic. So number one, parental safety concerns. And this varied from fears of literal abductions, like kidnappings from strangers, that their kids are going to get hurt, traffic dangers, increased a mindset shift, right? This mindset shift of, rather than free reign, the community will take care of each other, the neighbors will look out for our kids and we'll look out for their kids. It's kind of this focus on safety first parenting. So, kind of safety in general was kind of lumped into one category. Another one was citing kind of the day and age that we live in, which probably is a factor, right? Increased screen times. Some parents were citing it was literally just their children's preference. There was a preference to say they wanted to watch their iPads and their iPhones and play on their devices and their consoles more than the desire to actually go ride their bikes, play outside, go play sports, go to the park, etc. So increased screen time / technology, let's say. Okay. A third category was kind of this growing trend as well with structured schedules, right? A greater emphasis on academic excellence, extracurricular activities, after school programs, whether it's for childcare reasons or for, I guess buffing up one's extracurricular activity lists to look good for applications, but extracurricular activities, academics, etc., left little time to then pursue outdoor play. And then another one that's more just kind of global in nature, urbanization and accessibility issues. So limited access to safe parks, green spaces, playgrounds, especially in urban or low income areas. So there was also a socioeconomic component to this, is what was being said. So those were some of the things. And look, lastly, and then we'll just kind of talk about anecdotes, your experiences, my experiences. I'm going to not spend a ton of time on this. Some of this is just common sense. I don't know that they need to necessarily research with tons of money for these types of things, but some of the other consequences that the AAP was citing as part of this report was saying that, look, there may be potential, keywords, potential and loose concerns, physical concerns. Would this contribute to higher rates of childhood obesity, which is a growing concern, just as a general statement? Reduced physical fitness, muscle strength. Is this going to contribute to any kind of higher rates of anxiety and depression with kind of the lack of the socialization, maybe being too isolated indoors, lack of opportunities to develop those skills, to regulate emotions, regulate stress, navigate, dynamics with other children, how to regulate yourself when things don't go your way. So developmental concerns, mental and emotional concerns, and literally physical concerns about fitness and obesity, right? So these are some of the concerns. So these are part of the reasons that I'm bringing up this topic. It is something that people are talking more and more about in this day and age when it comes to parenting, young families, etc. So let's just reflect. So I am really curious. So for those of you who are here on the live chat, what were your experiences growing up as a kid? And I know this is going to be highly variable. This is non-judgmental, right? I don't know what the best way is. These are all just loose comments from loose surveys and loose reports. Like, every parent and every family had a different style of how the family unit was run, the rules of the household. The setting probably matters, whether you're in the dense city area, rural area, suburban area, et cetera, right? What were the crime rates in your area, right? So all of our stories are probably going to be different. So I'm just curious, like, what was your childhood experience? So I'm going to just share mine. So I grew up here in the Illinois suburbs, in specifically in the northern suburbs of Illinois, and yeah, typical, I would say, middle class area. Houses are very close together. There was a park very close by, probably, oh gosh, I mean, 5 minute walk, 6 minute walk, very convenient, right? And I remember all throughout elementary school, I mean, first grade, second grade, third grade, and I had two younger brothers. One of my middle brother was 3 years younger than me. And growing up, like he and I mean, we would come back from school, and at a certain point, we would sometimes even, walk to school, ride our bikes to school, and it was a pretty long bike ride. It wasn't like the shortest ride, but um, there was just kind of, I guess, a lot of inherent trust that as long as we did our homework, we were allowed to either ride our bikes or walk to the park, roam the neighborhood, as long as we are just kind of back by dinner time. Sometimes we'd go out again after dinner for a little bit, as long as we were back before it was too dark. Um, that's kind of how it went. And I would say, like, a typical day, especially when it wasn't frigid, for those of you who are insane enough to live in Illinois and endure the winters here, um, it was normal that we could we'd come home, try to do our homework and our worksheets or reading or whatever we'd have to do. We'd say, okay, bye, grandma, who would live with us, or our great grandma. We have a very young family. Our great grandma was actually living with us for a while. And we'd hop on our bikes or just walk to the park, and we would play basketball. We would go to the playground. We'd play with other kids. Oftentimes, like, our next door neighbor was one of our friends. There were other just acquaintances in the neighborhood. A lot of kids were in the neighborhood, and we would just roam around, like, literally like marauders, riding our bikes, walking to the park, just doing stupid things that boys do. And then we just come back, right? And think about this. I'm dating myself. I was, born in 1982. So this was the 80s. So, we're talking like, 88 to 89, early 90s. It really wasn't even till later, elementary school that we had pagers. Which this day and age, if I tell a young person, like, do you even know what a pager is, or, what that's for, they probably just look at me like I'm insane. But I mean, so we're even talking pre-pagers, right? We would sometimes use the payphones, right? And for those of you who remember using payphones regularly, payphones to even make like a collect call sometimes, right? And when you would make a collect call, they gave you this little time frame to say your name, but you could say, like, hey, this is me, Andrew. I'm going to be at the park, or I'm going to be at Dean's house, for a couple hours. I'll be back home. Don't worry. And, when they'd say, do you want to accept a collect call from, I'm at the park. Don't worry. I'm okay. Like, that's kind of how we'd communicate, right? We either actually use a payphone, put a quarter in, or we would, just quickly leave some kind of blurb message using like a collect call, and we'd be back. And I, maybe it's naivete. Maybe my memory's shot, because I mean, look, I could barely remember what I had for breakfast today, let alone remember my entire childhood. But it was a fun childhood. I mean, when I look back, I get nostalgic and I say, that was fun. Those were fun times with my brother and my friends in the neighborhood, just roaming around. I have very fond memories of that. And obviously, that's not going to be everybody's experience, but I just remember a lot of freedom. I do believe it let us kind of develop some independence and some courage and, some troubleshooting and problem solving, some sense of accountability to make sure we get back on time, to gauge the time right. We weren't always perfect at it, but that's kind of how it went. And I don't remember a time thinking I was in danger or I was in a tough situation. And again, not everyone's going to be fortunate depending on the locale that you're living in. But it was awesome. It was amazing. Hey, Andy Lee is joining us, a regular viewer here. Appreciate you, Andy. Andy says, riding bikes, building forts, exploring the neighborhood, playing pickup sports, gone in capitals in capital letters all day on adventures until the streetlights came on. It was glorious. That is a good word. It was very glorious, Andy. I concur. I'm very fortunate. I have very happy childhood memories. And I know not everyone is fortunate enough to have a lot of happy memories, but I'm blessed, and I had a fun childhood growing up. And says Andy says, I can't imagine that happens as much today. And yeah, that's the weird part, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at is those surveys I read off, right? Like again, I mean, there's surveys. I'm not going to put much weight into it, but is that what you see? Is that what you guys see in your neighborhoods? Do you see children, whether they're your own or other neighbors' kids, who are roaming around, having a good time, having that autonomy? Or do you not see that really in your neighborhoods? Carrie, thank you for joining in. I appreciate the support of you guys joining in. Carrie says, I'm not a parent, but if I was, I would be hesitant because there are way too many, pit bulls killing kids in the streets. Oh gosh. So no, but look, that's kind of what if you were here earlier, Carrie, that's kind of what I cited. One of the reasons that the American Academy of Pediatrics is when they surveyed parents, they said safety, just safety concerns, and they left it as a broad term, like environmental concerns, meaning there's like a pond nearby, so they're worried about drownings or animals, crime. So environmental concerns. Yeah, I could definitely understand that. So um, yes. So, I mean, so here's the thing, right? The other thing I want to talk about is, and I know that, again, the next few things I'm going to show, they're not going to be true of everyone's neighborhood. They're not, right? So I'm not obtuse, but, in my head, I was a little surprised. I'm going to admit, I was surprised. I actually didn't find the stats and the findings that I was going to find. Because in my head, I'm sitting here as a psychiatrist thinking to myself, well, I kind of know human psychology, but human psychology maybe sometimes does line up with reality. Not always, but sometimes it does. And I sat here thinking to myself as I was kind of doing a little prep work for this episode, I said, well, maybe it is just a reflection of like, there is more danger, right? Like maybe we hear it from, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on or whatever, like we just hear it nonstop in the news, right? Like it's a dangerous world out there. There's so much crime. There's so much problems. There's so much racism. There's so much hatred, right? I'm not saying those things don't exist, but like our media, right, and everything we read about in the news cycle is just like, it's a dangerous world, right? And I'm not saying we should be naive. Of course there are dangers, right? But so in my head, I'm saying, well, maybe there is just so much. And again, I'm lucky. I'm not in like a crime-ridden area of Chicago. I mean, I've lived in the city before. I'm in the suburbs, a very, very safe suburb of the Chicago area. But I'm saying, maybe crime is at an all-time high. Maybe kidnappings are at an all-time high. Maybe, missing kids are at an all-time high. Homicides, right? So I went and dug a little bit. I was actually surprised. So let's look at this, right? So let's look at how maybe you'll be surprised. And I know these are not going to be perfect statistics. So again, I'm not an expert on public health policy and where to analyze the stats the most accurately, but let's go through some of those. Let me flash it up on the screen again, right? The parental concerns of abductions, safety concerns in general, right? I definitely understand, right? I have a 9-year-old, so I get worried. Like, I don't want some stranger to mess with my kid, kidnap my kid, some weirdo come do something to my kid, right? So when I looked at kidnappings, this is more just a quote, but you can literally go to some of the FBI, databases and fact charts like online. These are just public domain information. Oftentimes they're a few years out of date after they've published things in retrospect. But I was surprised. So I want to be clear. The terminology I learned something new too. I didn't realize how loosely defined missing kids are. So apparently in like the FBI statistics and some of the DOJ statistics, missing is a very loose term. Missing could literally mean like you were gone for 24 hours, or there was just a report made by a concerned parent who then the kid might have come back even a few hours later. So the number I'm about to give you here, it definitely could be an underestimate because it also said that not every single, police district, county, like necessarily reports their stats to the FBI. So I also don't want to diminish, the numbers. People are saying this sounds absurdly low. It probably is an underestimate. So I'm going to preface it by saying that, right? But apparently, when it comes to this is the term that they use, it's a weird term, a stereotypical kidnapping. A stereotypical kidnapping. So they're saying this is a scenario where it's not a relative or a family member or like a family friend. So apparently the rates are going to be way higher for kidnappings for like someone who your family knows or literally in the family, or divorced parents and the father or the mother literally snatches the kid, without the other person's consent. Like they're counting all those as kidnappings too. And I'm not saying they're not, but when we think of what media, movies, and crime shows have showed us, like kind of this idea of a random stranger drives in, swoops, and abducts my child and kidnaps my child. That's what they're kind of referring to as stereotypical kidnapping. I was actually shocked. This stat says this is from, I believe, 2022, 2021. I could be off on that. They're saying like there was about 100 to 200 is what I read. And they're saying on average in the United States, there's anywhere from like 100 something to 300 of these stereotypical kidnappings, age 17 to 0. And again, it likely is an underestimate. There may be scenarios that are just never reported, not reported into this database. So again, I'm not trying to diminish the plight of kidnappings, stereotypical kidnappings of children. One is one too many. It's absurd. That's horrible. It's a tragedy. But I'm just saying, as a general comment, I'm kind of shocked it's not higher than this, is what I'm saying. Because in my mind, look, just thinking from the mindset of a parent, right? I don't sit here looking at public health stats. I'm like, oh, there must be tons, like, I mean, 5 figures of these stereotypical kidnapping. I was shocked at this number. So I'm just saying what's interesting is our psychological assumptions and fears and worst case scenarios and catastrophic thinking might be off from the reality of statistics, even if this is an underestimate to some degree, right? Okay, so that it was just interesting. So I'm just pointing it as interesting, right? Just kind of this is more about like talking about the psyche and our mindset in the public and as parents, right? So let's say, okay, screw that. Forget the stereotypical kidnappings, which it seems like most people agree are very rare. Okay. How about murder? How about homicide rates, right? And we hear about mass shootings, and tragically, there was another one that just happened the other day in Wisconsin at a Christian school. Terrible, terrible. We hear about these mass shootings. If you're in the Chicagoland area, if you turn on WBBM radio during your commute, if you turn on the local news, you hear it. It's so we're so desensitized, right? We hear about a shooting every day, every night. On a weekend, they'll say, like on a Monday morning, the news starts like this. Over the weekend in Chicago, there were 8 gunshot victims. 8 people died from gunshots, and they just move on to the weather. Right? So when this is all you hear, you say, good Lord, we live in a murderous society. All of these homicides, all of these killings. So I said, okay, so am I being one of these like boomers, someone who's getting up there, and I'm just thinking about this time when like, oh, well, we probably played outside so much because it was a safer time. And of course we need to be more careful. We're justified to be, that much more paranoid and anxious in this day and age because it's way worse than before. Right? I mean, so I wanted to see that as too. So let's pull this up. I was shocked. I was shocked. So look, it's not like, I mean, this is a little outdated. It's not like this has been the lowest it's ever been. Interestingly, there was a spike up in that 2022 period, right? 2021, 2022. But the homicide rates per 100,000 people in the population, and again, this is going to be so variable depending on where you live, right? But I'm just saying, as a national average, just to get a national snapshot, and again, for me personally, right? So find the time when you were a kid growing up, right? For me, it was the, late 80s, early 90s. Good Lord, it was much higher. We were seeing, look there, like in, let's say 89, right? 1989, we're seeing close to 10. And back in 2022, it was like 6.5. I mean, again, on a raw number value, it doesn't sound like a lot, but statistically, on a population level across the country, that's a huge difference. So even my assumption that it's way more dangerous because there's so much gun violence that we keep talking about in the news cycle doesn't seem to be the case factually. Okay, and again, if you know someone who has died or has been lost, injured to gun violence, I'm not diminishing that by any means. So please don't take it the wrong way. I'm just saying it's just this phenomenon in our minds that like it is so unsafe to step outside. And I'm saying to myself, yeah, it makes sense to me. Yet it's not matching the actual stats and statistics. So is part of this, I'm just curious, right? Like, is part of it the fact that social media, the news cycles, and how we're fed information is almost so slanted and biased towards fear mongering because fear sells, that we've now as a society like kind of ingrained this into our psyche, that is the norm, right? To have this fear-based approach to looking at our neighborhoods, at looking at our environment as in terms of how we raise our kids. And of course, there's got to be a balance. I'm not saying be so blasé, right? To me, and I actually tell my patients this all the time, like being nervous, being stressed, and being worried, like for safety purposes, whether it's for yourself, your loved ones, your spouse, your kids, that's not pathological, right? I think one would expect almost a psychiatrist or therapist to say, oh, like, just be super zen and be mellow. And no. Think about what I'm about to say here, right? Having zero stress, having zero anxiety, that is concerning. That is weird. I'll be blunt. That's weird. Think about this. And I know I'm going to give you a very extreme example, but it's more to just make a point on what I'm saying here, right? I'm a father. I got a 9-year-old boy named Tyler. And if I said, hey, Tyler, run across that 8-lane highway with cars zooming at 70, 80 miles an hour, good luck. Hope you make it. I'm going to be stress-free about it. Is that healthy for him? Is that healthy for me? Is that safe for him? Is that a good thing for me to be doing as a parent? No, of course not. You guys are all like, that's a stupid example, but no. But then now let's bring it to reality. For me to say to my kid, hey, you know what? I'm worried. I don't want you to get hit by a car. Let's hold hands. Let's go to the crosswalk. Let's look both ways. Let's wait till a signal turns to that walking symbol and let's go together. Is that pathological? Does that equate to an anxiety disorder? No, of course not. So there's got to be a balance, right? So that's my point when I was talking about how ranting a little bit about news cycles maybe almost socially engineering us, right? News and social media, dangerous world, dangerous. I'm not saying be blasé because that would be the consequence of having no stress and no worry. But are we almost overdoing it on the other end of the spectrum to some degree? Because we're now getting indoctrinated and socially engineered to believe if everyone is a threat, everything is a danger. Yeah, and so a couple comments coming in. Carrie says, I think the drug situation is significantly different. Oh, I would agree. I think so. I think you're right. When she was a kid, or he was a kid, let me see. When Carrie was a kid, the worst case would be some bad teens offering cigarettes. Yeah. Now, yeah, you're right. Cigarettes, right? Cigarettes was the wild thing to do growing up in most schools, right? Now it's fentanyl, heroin, meth. Andy says, with the internet and social media, what used to be a local story is now often national news. It warps the perception when it comes to how prevalent crime actually is in data. You're right. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, Andy. I think you are absolutely right because you're right. Let's reflect on what Andy was saying there. Very good point. It's again, 80s, right? Classic way that you're going to consume your news is you turn on the local news on, what NBC, ABC, whatever, right? At whatever time it is at your locale, 6 p.m., 7 p.m. And you just kind of get a local summary of what's going on. Or you bought the newspaper And God, how slow is that news cycle, right? Everything's probably outdated by several days or even a week, right? Um, and you're right. Now, good God, I mean, like X and Instagram, all these places, they sometimes are breaking news instantly. Like you're getting footage on the ground of like a crime in progress, right? Or some major event, political event, some protest in progress, right? Beating major news outlets. I mean, that's how fast it is now, right? You're right, Andy. It's almost like there were probably, I mean, look, I didn't have time to like look into the prevalence of you know, sex offenders, pedophiles, etc., right? I mean, these things were happening. Look at what I just said. I'm shocked, right? See, this is how naive I am. Like murder rates per 100,000 were higher back when I was a kid. But if you only heard about it once in a blue moon in the local paper versus now we're at a touch of a button, we can ask Chat GPT or all these AI bots out there, give me all these stats. You could probably inundate yourself with fear, right? And just like paint yourself this terrible picture of what America has become, right? So no, absolutely, great point, great point. So look, so yeah, so that's the fascinating part. So you know, it, when we go through that list from the AAP, right? Let's just flash it up on the screen for those who are joining because it looks like we've had some people join. So the fear of abduction, injury, you know, traffic dangers, yeah. I mean, again, I think they're valid concerns. I'm not saying they're not valid, but there also seems to be a little bit of a disconnect in the reality of no. No. Can you, Carrie, can you really expect to convince someone by showing them data? No, no, I don't think so. You're absolutely right. And again, the point of this conversation is not even to convince that this isn't a dangerous world. That's not the point. It's just more just a dialogue for us to say, like, reflecting on your own parenting style, right? Or how you will tend or how you think you might parent. It's just to kind of brainstorm together, like, what factors into our personal decisions, and each of us are going to have a different threshold of what's safe, what's not safe, what's too much free roaming, you know, how much tighter rein I need to have on my kid, right? So let's talk about some of the other factors like screen time, right? No, now that one I do think, I mean, I don't think there's much debate. You probably don't have to do sophisticated surveys. I think we see it in our households. I mean, look, I mean, we're talking over social media right now, right? I mean, I know, God, I have too much screen time as an adult. And right, I mean, supposedly as adults, we have better impulse control. Oh God, right? You think so? I don't know. I'm still working on that. So, you know, so we as adults are struggling into rein in screen time, right? And our impulsivity. Um, so now apply that to a kid, right? So to children. So no, that definitely resonates, right? And I think about my own kid, right? Just relating it back to personal. Um, Look, I, I'm a psychiatrist. That does not make me a model parent. Good Lord. Like it could become such a touchy subject. Sometimes I know people bring up screen time with kids. I'm going to tell you right now, I know for a fact my son Tyler gets way too much screen time. Okay, way too much. You know, what do you want me to do? I probably, if I took a step back, probably should have reined it in earlier in his life. You know, but it is what it is. I mean, I try to be very direct with him. There have been times where maybe, you know, he does it a little too much. I have to kind of pull him away, say, hey, let's go get some fresh air. Let's go, you know, go run some errands. Literally, come with me to Walmart or Target or whatever. Let's go get some fresh air. Let's go do something. Let's go to the playground. Let's go just, I don't know, find something to do, right? Just to get out. So, you know, there is work to be done on my end, right? With more intentionality of making sure he gets some fresh air, that he puts down the tablet or gets away from his PC. He's very big on PC gaming, on and likes Roblox and all these games on Steam, which is, you know, some, you know, kind of the PC equivalent of like a console, with a bunch of games on that platform. And again, I don't want to vilify, right? I mean, we're not going to spend too much time with this. I mean, oh my God, you go on Google or whatever search engine and you type the negative consequences of screen time, and right, you're going to find 8 million articles on why there's so many dangers with kids doing screen time. And I don't disagree with that, right? Whether it's like eye strain, becoming lethargic, inattention issues, right? Again, all those developmental skills with not having more real life social interactions, right? So, yeah, those are things. I'm not, belittling those concerns or diminishing those concerns. Those are concerns, right? Um, but I also don't want to vilify technology and you leveraging technology, because look, there are also studies to be fair and balanced, right? Even the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics themselves have published things like there are some benefits, again, in moderation, right? Kids are leveraging learning apps, right? Helping them with learning and problem solving, critical thinking with these educational based apps. There is a value with entertainment, right? Entertainment with shows that are wholesome and fulfilling, etc. They can actually give a parent a small break to have them use it in moderation to get a breather, right? So they can do a few things around the household, etc. Right? So um, children with disabilities, right? Technology devices can leverage and help those with disabilities. So there's so many different things. Social connectedness. You can FaceTime, video message, and talk to relatives that are far away, stay connected. So, of course, there's benefits, social connectedness, access to information. But again, I do think there is some validity to, the day and age we live in, the appeal and draw of instant gratification, instant connection at your fingertips, instant streaming. There is an appeal, right? And we could definitely look. If you can't relate to that, then oof, you must be really disciplined. But even as adults, there is so much instant gratification of using our devices. So Carrie asks, is it even true that less kids are playing outside? What if we are just hearing parents whose kids don't play complain more because of the internet and more reporting? So yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. That's why if you were here at the start of today's show and episode, Carrie, that's why I said I didn't even spend much time on those surveys and analyzing it, because these types of surveys, they have such loose, the findings are not super solid, right? I mean, so these are just loose studies. They're not going to be overly generalizable. I mean, look, we can't even survey. Look at the recent election, right? You can't. Yeah, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. It's just like they can't even get polling correct, right? I mean, the most trusted polling sources are saying that Kamala Harris is going to win, and then Trump like wins in a landslide in the popular vote, right? So to your point, polls and surveys, who knows? Is it true that kids are actually playing outside less than before? I have no idea. But I think there is a perception that's happening, and there are definitely a cohort of parents who are not allowing their kids to play outside as much. And again, depending on your neighborhood, it's probably skewed the other way. And there may be tons of kids playing outside. So it's just more just to talk specifically to those who do have qualms about letting this happen, right? So um so increased screen time. I think that that in itself, and going back to Andy's point earlier, um yeah, I just think this dissemination of fear, and all these stories through social media, I do think it has an impact on parents and their concerns about allowing people outside. I mean, look, I know we're going off on a tangent here, right? Every time one of these mass shootings happens at a school, right? Elementary school, middle school, high school. I mean, neighborhoods and families across the country, it's high alert, right? I mean, then schools start doing the shooter drills and start doing them more actively again, right? Everyone gets concerned. You literally start seeing an increase in sales in Kevlar backpacks. I mean, that's sad. It's sad that it's sad that in America that's even a thing, right? There are go. You think I'm joking? Go Google, right? Bulletproof Kevlar backpacks. That is a thing. I'm not using hyperbole. I'm not making this up, right? So that is like the epitome, the epitome of the manifestation of the fear. And I'm not mocking and I'm not judging. Like I said, is there a healthiness to some level of vigilance for your children? Of course there is. I mean, they're the most precious things in your lives. Absolutely. But I'm just saying, gosh, isn't it also a sad commentary that those types of items actually sell in America? Uh, Bulletproof backpacks, right? I mean, so fear is a big business as well, right? So it's just kind of crazy, right? So, anyways, so like I said, I'm fascinated, guys. So for those of you who are listening to this non-live, I'd love to hear it. You heard a little bit about my childhood, how things were. It was kind of like Andy's, actually. So it's just, riding bikes, playing at the park, playing at the playground, literally taking a baseball bat with a bucket of beat up baseballs, just hitting some balls, playing catch at the park, playing basketball. I mean, that's kind of what it was. And I still think plenty of kids do that, right? So I'm not trying to portray that America has just become a bunch of hermits living in their homes, but what is your neighborhood like? Are you still kind of seeing the same type of depiction that I'm portraying out there? Are some of these surveys that I kind of cited at the beginning of this episode, are these absurd? You don't see any of that. You see a thriving, happy, communal based neighborhood. And that's the thing too, right? I'm curious, what is the community like in the area that you live? Like is there a sense of communal bonding, right? I think that's also going to depend on where you live. It's going to depend on you and your personality. Now, myself, me and my wife, we actually are rather private and introverted, I would say. I don't think, yeah, I'm not even saying that in a judgmental way. It's just we're just kind of introvert. Like, I mean, look, I can hold my own at some random get together, mixer, conference, whatever you want to call it. Like, I can go blaff. Look at me. I can just talk into thin air for, if you let me, I could just keep talking for 2 hours probably until my voice goes hoarse. So, I'm one of those, I guess, what do they call them, right? Like an extroverted introvert, right? So social skills, no problem. Reading the room, no problem. Negotiating, nuance, whatever, no problem. I mean, I got to talk for a living. I got to have empathy, empathetic listening, validation to others. I mean, that's part of my job. I mean, and I'm pretty good at it. But I'm also introverted and I actually recharge and I get energized by spending some alone time, some quiet time, some downtime with myself or myself and my wife and kid. Like that's how I recharge. I get exhausted at these big gatherings with a group of friends. I'm not saying I don't enjoy it. I just say I get exhausted from them, literally. So so part of it is too, I think it's also kind of come down to the heads of the household, right? Um, how does the head of the household who kind of sets the tone for the family, like, how do you integrate or not integrate with the neighborhood, right? And I will say in general, like in our neighborhood, they're very friendly, cordial neighbors. Um, but I do think in general, most of the neighbors kind of keep to themselves, as do we, right? At least that's the perception I have. There are some kids playing here and there, but I would say I don't see groups of kids roaming around just looking for other kids to just pick up randomly. But then, I go over to other acquaintances' neighborhoods, right? Like one of my buddies from back in the day, an old coworker, Ryan, he probably lives maybe in 45, 50 minutes from me. And I mean, they're having like neighborhood block parties, neighborhood grill barbecues, open backyard, stop in, grab a burger and a beer type of thing, right? So trust, there's again, that neighborhood, there is kind of this like communal vibe, right? We're going to look out for your kid. Our kids are your kids' friends. Your kids are our kids' friends. Open door policy. hop on in. Oh, we hear commotion. What's going on? Can we hang out? Can we join the party? Right. So, Lisa, thank you for joining. Lisa from the West Coast in the house. Lisa in Seattle, we cherish downtime and are polite, but keep to ourselves in the neighborhood. Yeah, so yeah, there we go, Lisa. Exactly. So even that's going to be a factor, right? So I think there's so many factors that go into this topic, right? It's people who set the tone for the household, the neighborhood itself. What's the community vibe, for lack of a better term, of your community? The safety, the crime rates in your community, environmental factors. Yeah, I mean, look, if I live on a busy road, because of course, does someone want a quiet, tucked in neighborhood somewhere away from heavy traffic? Of course, but can we always afford that prime lot? No, of course not, right? So you living on a major artery road where there are people zooming by 50 miles an hour, yeah, I'd be much more concerned to let my kid out of my sight and run around the neighborhood, right? Because I'm worried a car's going to hit them. Versus I'm in some tucked in, quiet little spot or semi-rural spot, right? I mean, it's like, hey, go run in the fields for all I care, right? So all these things go into it. So it's a very complex topic, but figure today we talk a little bit more casually, right? We kind of hit you heavy last time with the shady pharma, the shady pharma history of direct to consumer advertising. We've talked about the United Healthcare CEO assassination and murder. Um, so and yeah, Carrie brings up a great point. I think in neighborhoods which are ethnic diasporas and enclaves, there is more trust. You're right. Even ethnicity, right? Are you in a kind of a homogenous, at least heavily homogenous area, right? Where even that ethnic cultural kind of factor, right, kind of breeds that kind of trust and safety, right? So it's a fascinating topic and a complex topic, but yeah, it's interesting, and I think we're probably going to see more and more of this literature coming out. It's becoming this hotter topic. I think it's going to be always coupled with this new phenomenon: screen time, technology. Is it too much? Are the negatives outweighing the positives, in particular with our kids, right? This is going to continue to be a hot topic, and I think inevitably, as there are more and more sociological, anthropological studies, psychological studies on the children and screen time, overutilization, over reliance on technology, inevitably, I think this topic, parenting style, parenting boundaries, balanced downtime, balanced playtime, outside, inside, device, no device. These are going to continue to become more and more studied. There's going to be more literature on this. There's going to be more public health scrutiny about these things. So I think it's a topic that's here to stay. So for those of you listening, please put your comments below. If you're listening to this after this live recording, I just, again, put your comments. For those of you who have not subscribed, please subscribe, please like, stay tuned. And yeah, we're going to cook up the next scheduled episode. Will be, again, we do the Insomniacs Livestream late at night as I'm drinking coffee at 11:19 p.m. Central. Tuesday nights and Saturday nights, 10:30 Central, guys. So 11:30 Eastern. And for Lisa out on the West Coast, what is that? 8:30 PST, right? So not too late for Lisa out there. But I guess the only other thing I'm going to announce before we wrap up for today is next week. Oh, thank the Lord. Next week, Monday through Friday, I get some PTO. Some much needed PTO. I am getting close to burnout, the risk of burnout at the workplace lately. It's so crazy. It is so crazy. But next week, during my PTO week. I plan to probably do a couple more bonus live streams. So probably, we're still going to do the standard Tuesday, Saturday stuff, but I'm going to see if I could fit in a couple more. So stay tuned. And especially for you regular listeners, I'll see if I can squeeze in maybe at least one more, maybe not two more during my downtime to make the most of it. Like just like Carrie's doing right now, throw in a few topics. Carrie says I'd be interested in an episode about the role of religion in therapy. How can it help? What if it's a source of shame and stress for someone? Yeah, that is a very intriguing topic. It is a very intriguing topic. Something that I don't think I've ever sat here kind of formalizing bullet points of how I think it could help or cause shame, but it is something, it's a dynamic that happens oftentimes. Myself, since we got some time here, for those of you who are still sticking around. So for those of you who have to sign off, you guys have a good night. This is bonus time now. We'll ramble here for a few more minutes before we log off. Look, my background is, I grew up in a Christian household. I would say various denominations of, Protestant variations of Christianity. So at one point at a Methodist church, one point at a Baptist church, many years in a Presbyterian church, and then probably in my adult years, these, I don't even know what you'd call them, non-denominational Presbyterian slant kind of church. And I'll be blunt, I haven't been to church since the peak of the pandemic now. So it's been several years. Maybe going on 3 years, maybe even more. And, even though I haven't been attending regular services, I still, from on a personal level, I still believe in all the core tenets of Christianity, meaning I still believe in the concept of the Christian God, his son, who I consider, Savior Jesus Christ, and a lot of, I would say, at least the core principles of Christianity. But I also do think I have a strange, aloof relationship to the institution of the church bodies. And again, this might not apply to everyone, but maybe some of you who are listening can, maybe this will resonate with some of you. Like for the most part, I've attended Asian American Protestant churches. And I don't know. I've become a little leery of the participation in kind of that, I guess, type of church at times for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to bore you guys, but I get turned off by how sometimes it becomes more of a business model than, than a religious gathering place. Lisa says yes to the religion topic. As a pediatric nurse, I'm interested in the anger parents experience with God. Oof, yeah, that is a tough one. Tough one. Who they blame for their child's illness or death. No, that's rough. That's heavy stuff, Lisa. So what particular area in peds? Is it general peds, or I'm just out of curiosity, or do you work in the hospital in like an ICU setting? What type of setting are you working in, and what particular area? Just out of curiosity, since you commented, that's a fascinating topic. Yeah. So, and back to what I was rambling about, it's even with relationships to religion itself. It's an interesting topic, Carrie. Like, it's almost a dilemma that I face personally, right? I believe in principles, and I still consider maybe someone else would judge me and say that doesn't count or something, but I still believe I have a individual personal relationship with God. And do my actions always reflect it in the traditional sense of attending church for a Sunday service or being part of some Bible study group? No, probably not. And I'm not obtuse. Those are areas I probably want to work on, not need to, but want to work on at some point, to nurture my spirituality. But I have strained relationship, I guess, for a variety of other reasons, whether it's kind of how sometimes church almost becomes a for-profit corporation more than a gathering place for fellowship. Uh, I also don't like how so many aspects of politics have entered um, into the church arena, where depending on what side of the aisle you're on, you're going to find a church where you're like, oh my gosh, like, I almost feel like there's so much hypocrisy. You say this as a Christian, yet you have these views as a, in terms of political things you're bringing into the pulpit. So, I have some qualms about how certain church leaders infuse their own political biases into the pulpit and into sermons, rather than kind of focusing on kind of the texts of the religion that they're trying to educate people on. Even some of just I guess, of course, there are healthy aspects of fellowship within a church, but kind of like some of you are saying, right? Both Carrie and Lisa, there's also there's kind of this shame, right? Like, I don't know. I'm gonna say in Asian American churches, not always, but I would say in a lot of Korean churches, it's almost kind of a shame based variation of Christianity. It's like we infuse kind of this Asian cultural value of shame, the societal concept of shame, which is kind of a principle in Asian cultures. And we infuse that shame even more so than whatever you consider the baseline level of shame in Christian doctrine in churches. And it's really like this profound shame based version of Christianity. And oh gosh, so Andy feels me. Andy says, yeah, Andy Lee says, yes, especially in the run up to the election, too many church services were sounding like political rallies. that's that's partly the reason why I've been almost averse to. I've been ambivalent. I'm going to use the word ambivalent. I've really been struggling. You can ask my wife. I've been saying, oh, we should go back. I want to maybe go back, but like I also actually set a boundary. I said I'm not going back until the election's done, because I'm like I cannot hear political ranting from a minister or a pastor. I said if anything, that I would have such a averse reaction, I probably wouldn't go back for 5 more years or something. So I actually set a boundary, Andy. I said I was going to wait until the 2024 election was done before I would set foot back into a formal church setting, because I said at least then I know there's going to be at least a 3-year reprieve of not having to hear political rantings within sermons, or infused into prayers, or infused into small group Bible studies. So I really was turned away from my previous church, because whether they admit it or not, it just became uh, it just became a politically charged place. So back to kind of the topic at hand, though, it's yeah, I do think so. No, I just wanted to at least give some context. Like, that's my background, right? So when I talk about this topic, maybe in an upcoming episode next week, right? Like, I just want you to understand, for the people who've been here regularly, right? I'm gonna present it just from my own personal viewpoint of someone who grew up in a Christian household, who considers themselves personally as a Christian to this day, but has a very kind of you know, strained, kind of complex relationship with religion, like many people do. I'm not unique in that sense. And I also work in a field, right, the field of psychiatry, where I would say I don't think it's a far cry to say it's not that mental health, the field of psychology, therapy, um, psychiatry itself is like anti-religion. I don't think so. Like, if there's plenty of literature that, and I think most, I would say mature therapists and psychiatrists who are skilled and mature and are truly out for the best interests of their patients, right? It's really about meeting our patients where they're at, understanding what is their relationship, what is their struggle, what is their conflict with religion, right? And understanding that is kind of the most important part. And then understanding the distress or dilemma or the conflict around it, kind of going back to Carrie's point, like, it could be a source of support and strength and something they lean on during times of duress or when they're overwhelmed. Or it can actually be a source of shame and stress. And it can actually invoke guilt, self deprecation, solidifying these distorted thoughts that I am a failure, I am a sinner, I am horrible, I am worthless, I can't live up to the tenets of, you know, Christianity, Islam, hitting certain levels of, that inner peace and mindfulness that I'm practicing through Buddhism, etc. Right? So it can cut both ways. I know that's a generic answer, but it can cut both ways. But yeah, definitely. I'll brainstorm. I'll try to think what specific, because we could take that in so many different directions. We could take it to Lisa's direction of that conflict and anger with grappling with things that are out of one's control and then blaming God. Um, Interesting question. So, curious, if I had a patient who was a Christian and they asked you to pray for them, would you have to refuse? Would it be unethical as a medical professional? My answer is no. No, I wouldn't say so. Maybe some might disagree with me. I put it this way: I would say, I wouldn't say never, but I would say usually I would not insert that proactively and say, hey, I'm a Christian, let me pray for you, or let's have some kind of joint prayer. No, I wouldn't do that. That's not my place, and that's not my role when I'm serving as a psychiatrist in a doctor-patient relationship, right? I view, again, this is me personally, not every psychiatrist may think like this. The way I view it, and I connect it to my personal life with religion, is I truly, not to sound corny, right? I view what I do in my work in the field of psychiatry as a manifestation and an extension of the values I believe in, right? I'm not like, and please, I'm not trying to come across as egotistical or narcissistic, but I work damn hard. I really do. Um, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes when I'm tired and I feel overly stressed, overly burnt out. Yeah, I probably have room for improvement with my affect, my tone of voice, how, maybe I said something wrong and offended someone accidentally or, unintentionally. But for the most part, I would say almost the vast majority of the patients I'm working with right now and have worked with, we tend to have a very good rapport. I'm not saying we're besties. I'm just saying we have a professional, trustworthy rapport. Um, I purposely switch jobs to work at a place where I can take my time. Um, Back in the day, I used to work at a hospital-based clinic. I worked as an employee for the hospital, and we would see, on average, right, 4 patients an hour, 15 minutes, meaning by the time you walk from the waiting room to my office, sit down, we maybe have like 8, 9 minutes to talk quickly. And then I need a couple minutes to finish my note and send your medication to the pharmacy through the computer. I mean, what can you really accomplish with 8 minutes, 9 minutes? Someone says, I just got sexually assaulted. Someone says, I want to end my life. Someone says, I'm struggling with addiction that's ruined my life, ruined my marriage. My kid is suicidal. What do I do? And they have a breakdown. And I say, you got 8 minutes, pal. So, I made a conscious choice at one point. Like I wanted to get back to the roots the best I can of trying to work in a setting where I can actually get to know my patients. So even that decision to me was a reflection of values, right? Like I want to value, even though it's still not perfect in my current setting, it's a hell of a lot better. What I respect about my current workplace, even if they're not perfect, is they give me 1 hour for that initial visit and 30 minutes apiece instead of 8, 9 minutes apiece to talk with a patient for every follow-up visit. Okay. And trust me when I say, look, when I'm talking with a patient in a 30-minute follow-up visit, like med decisions, picking like what dose to, like what med to pick, what dose to adjust it to, reviewing your side effects. Look, at this point in my life, 13 years of active practice, that's like a 3 or 4 minute endeavor. It's very algorithmic. I can make that decision like 3, 4 minutes, meaning I now have like 25 minutes to get to know my patient, to actually hear, not just hear the words coming out of their mouth, but listen and hear what they're trying to convey to me in their struggle, in their distress, to connect with them on a very basic human level and let them know, like, look, I can't solve all your problems. I don't even have all the answers. I'm just trying to meet you where you're at, and we're going to try to figure it out together. I'm going to try to be here to support you through this, even if it's through what we're doing together, in our interaction versus what I'm going to prescribe for you to put in your body, but we're going to try to work through this together. And to me, I see that as an extension of my Christian duty. Again, not to sound cheesy, but that's innately like what I view that as in my work. Now, back to your question, if a patient were to ask me, you know, would you pray for me? I would, and I have done that. And I don't think that's unethical. It's a patient asking me voluntarily. They're the ones requesting it, saying, because maybe we have some connection on a level, right? Like sometimes they don't know. They say, hey, like, are you religious? Do you have spiritual beliefs, Dr. Kim? And if they ask me, I'll try to say, yeah, I'm a Christian. And if they say, well, as a Christian, like, I'm like, could you pray with me or pray for me? And sometimes I've prayed for them outside of the session. I tell them, I promise I will, and I'll follow through. Other times they literally ask me, can you just say a quick prayer with me, right now during our visit? And I will, and I have done that. I've had non-Christians actually ask me, saying, I don't believe in God. I've never really been into the church thing. I don't believe in any religion, but, are you religious in any way? And I say, yeah. Again, they asked me, right? I didn't bring it up. I didn't initiate it. I didn't impose it on them. And they say, would you mind saying a prayer for me? And I say, sure. Yeah, I have absolutely no problem doing that for you. If that will bring you some comfort, if that will bolster your mood, if it makes you feel like that much more that you understand that I care for you as a doctor and a patient, like, yeah, of course I'll do that for you. And I have done that. So to answer your question, Carrie, yeah. So, again, we can keep going on and on, but yeah, just please feel free. Send me more aspects, whether it's just through the comments on this live stream that I'll read later. When this is posted as a recorded video, but leave me more comments. This is fascinating stuff. So this is where I appreciate you guys got my juices flowing. So Lisa, Carrie, Andy. So let me know what other kind of aspects of kind of the religious side or the religious component of spirituality, religion. So we'll use the terms loosely, whether it's actual structured religion or spirituality. Like what other, I guess, avenues or twists on that regarding mental health or in healthcare would you like to hear about? And yeah, let's do that. Let's at least one of the episodes next week. I'll try to make it a priority to see if we can focus on this. I know we've already spent now an extra, I said we're going to talk for a couple bonus minutes. Now we've probably done almost a half an episode here already, but that's why I appreciate you guys. So like I said, I am an extroverted introvert. And if you get me going, I could probably still blab for another hour, but I also know I got a brutal day of work tomorrow. See, that's a cognitive distortion right there. See, those of you who are not familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, right there, distortion. How do I know it's going to be brutal? I made the assumption and I've already biased the outlook of the day. That's an example of what you would do in cognitive behavioral therapy. We have hundreds of these a day. I got work to do as a psychiatrist, guys. So before I identify 10 more distortions in the next 5 minutes, I really appreciate you guys. You can see me laughing, right? Laughing, smiling. I enjoy interacting with you guys. So you guys made my night. I hope that for Lisa on the West Coast, it's not super late, but for those of you on Central Time and Eastern Time, go to sleep soon, guys. I'm preaching to, I'm the hypocrite here. I'm not sleeping. I'm drinking coffee, but Hope you guys have a good night. I really appreciate you guys joining in. And remember, we'll make sure I'll post one up soon for Saturday, 10:30 Central, for the next episode of the Insomniacs. Dr. Andrew Kim, please subscribe. Thank you very much, guys, and peace out. Have a good night.